Hey everyone, Cody Hayes here, and I'd like to welcome you to this lecture where we are going to look at our first of the undisputed letters of Paul. So our beginning look really at Paul and his writings, and we're going to look at First Thessalonians. So First Thessalonians, of course, it's one of the letters that everybody holds Paul to be the author of. So let's start off with the date and the audience. First Thessalonians, it was written around the years of 49 to 51 CE/AD. The majority of historians place First Thessalonians as the first of Paul's writings, which would make it the first book of the canonical New Testament. There are some historians, they would be in the minority, that holds that the letter to the Galatians was the first of Paul's letters. And where they base that on is that Galatians really has more of the major elements that we think of with Pauline theology that you don't see within First Thessalonians. But the fact that you don't see that in First Thessalonians is what makes the majority of historians hold that First Thessalonians was written first. It's kind of like when we looked at the relationship of the canonical Gospels, and that the majority of historians hold that Mark's Gospel was written first. And that's because Mark has the lowest Christology. One of the reasons why it has the lowest Christology. Something very similar here with First Thessalonians. In terms of Pauline theology, it's very, very low. And the audience for First Thessalonians was a Gentile Christian audience. So look a little bit here at the opening of the letter in early Christian apocalypticism. Paul, he begins with an opening that is common for all his letters. However, this opening shows that his audience are Gentiles. So Gentiles, non-Jewish people who have, in this case, embraced the Christian faith. And I put the citation for that, First Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 9, where in that passage, Paul writes about how, you at one time, served idols, and now you serve the true and living God. And of course, the idols would represent anything that's not the God of Abraham. So that would indicate that these individuals were following the various Greco-Roman gods. So Gentiles, non-Jews, but now they have embraced the God of Abraham. And there's a notion how when the trumpet sounds, those who have died in Christ will rise. Then those who are alive will rise up to meet Jesus. One particular Christian teaching that seems to go in cycles with popularity, and you pretty much find it only in evangelical circles, is the teaching known as the rapture. And the rapture, in terms of Christian theology, is very, very young. You would find its origins in the 19th century. And for a 2,000-year-old faith, that's pretty young. But a lot of the theology is based on this passage in First Thessalonians and also a passage from the Gospel of Matthew. But essentially, Paul, states how those who have died in Christ, when the trumpet sounds and when Jesus returns, they'll rise up. And then those of us who are currently alive will rise up, will be taken up into the clouds to meet with Jesus. And that this parousia this return of Christ should come at any moment. So you need to be prepared. So this parousia, this return of Christ, parousia means presence, but the presence of Christ, the return of Christ could come at any moment, so you need to be prepared. This was a common attitude within the Christian movement for really about the first 5 decades of its existence, after, of course, the death of Jesus. And it wasn't until you get into the last decade of the first century you start to see that attitude go away. But it was certainly present here in First Thessalonians, in the um, beginnings around of the 5th decade of the first century. That essentially the return of Christ, it could come at any time, and so you need to be prepared. Well, that's essentially it that we have for First Thessalonians. Didn't take a whole lot of time, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. Till then, take care.